Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and I wanted to go through the symptoms of autism. I was about to make a video about why I believe that the term HSP is just a nicer word for saying that you have autism. But one of my favorite creators actually did the video for me. I found the video today. So it seems that autistic creators are have been noticing the resurgence of the HSP label. I'll just say that I identified as HSP when I was about 15, which was when I got into MBTI. Or maybe I was 14, I don't know. Anyway, I identified as that for a short while. And then I realized, I was a little bit too much of a special snowflake kind of thing. And the label was not helping me in any way. I knew that I was sensitive. I've always been sensitive. I've always been called sensitive. But the label hasn't helped me, you know. Instead, it has been more empowering for me personally to reclaim my power kind of in saying that, yeah, okay, so maybe I might be sensitive, but I'm also very strong. You know, that's kind of the way that I got out of that cycle. Because otherwise there's this whole victimization kind of problem. I don't want to diss anybody who identifies as a highly sensitive person, as an HSP. I just want to say that I think that it is very close to autism. So I would recommend that you check out the video by I Am Mindblind. She's one of my favorite autistic YouTubers out there. She really discusses her struggles and how she lives in an authentic way. And so I'll put her link in the description. Meanwhile, we'll be going on just the diagnostic criteria for autism, which, if you kind of look at all of them through a highly sensitive person lens, you'll find out that it is basically being a highly sensitive person, but in medical terms. A highly sensitive person was created by Elaine Aron in like 1996, and that was before a lot of research has been done on autism. And it might have been useful then, but we know so much more now, and I think that we shouldn't retract our steps and go back to the HSP label, because it's a little bit problematic, you know. Autism is also problematic, but at least the DSM, the psychologists and the psychiatrists are trying to change the system. For example, Asperger's doesn't exist anymore. Now it's autism support levels 1, 2, and 3. They're trying to figure out a system that works a little bit better. And that actually helps people with who are neurodivergent. So let's go through the list. I'm going on a website called embrace-autism.com, and it has a lot of tests, like self-tests to see if you have autism, and these are actually based on psychologists and like the actual diagnostic process for autism. So I think that they're a pretty good site. And so they warn us first at the beginning on this website that the DSM, the diagnostic manual for is a pathology manual. So obviously it will be talking about impairments and negatives rather than positives. So positive traits are ignored because that's not what the criteria are about. Okay, so that's why a lot of people kind of cringe at me saying that autism, like HSP, is basically autism, because autism is viewed as an illness, which it is not. There are a lot of diagnoses that are not illness diagnoses. For example, there is a diagnosis that you've been attacked by an alligator. That is actual diagnosis. There is a diagnosis that you've been out in outer space for too long. There are a strange amount of diagnoses that are like not at all coupled to a disease. You could even argue that certain physical diseases are not actually diseases. For example, diabetes is just a condition that predisposes you to certain complications that can be disease. But having diabetes in itself doesn't mean that you feel ill or that there is an illness in your body. It just means that you have a much higher risk of developing, for example, heart disease or kidney disease. But the actual diabetes in itself is not a disease. The difference is for psychiatric diseases or conditions or disorders or whatever you want to call them, is that in order for you to get a diagnosis, you need to have actual impairment on your functioning in certain areas of life, often several areas of life. Another thing about the DSM is that most of the people on the DSM board are coupled with the pharmaceutical industry. So there will be some, difficulties there. The difference is, though, that autism does not have a medical pharmaceutical treatment. So I think that it is, in a way, more, less biased than certain other diagnoses. Now, let's go into this. So the criteria aren't bad. They're actually, a lot of people have been sitting and thought about this, as opposed to the HSP, where basically one person sat down and decided to create this diagnosis. She may have done studies on the amount of sensitivity and reception, but it's still only one person, okay? So the categories are category A, B, C, D, E, and A is autistic social communication and social interaction, social. B is repetitive patterns of behavior. So, and the behaviors are S's, so stimming, sameness, special interests, and sensory sensitivities. C is that it has to be present since childhood, like a C, right? D is the degree to which autism affects daily functioning. So that's what I talked about, impairment. And E is the traits are not better explained by intellectual disability. And that's because if you have an intellectual disability, it will resemble autism. But the intellectual disability takes precedence over the autism. Okay, so in the category A, which is persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, you need to have 3 out of 3, all 3 of these 3 that I'm going to enumerate. So these are all social things. 1 is deficit in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure to normal back and forth conversation, to reduced sharing of interests, emotions, or affect, to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. Okay, I have this in that I rarely initiate the social interactions, but I've gotten better with time because, you see, I have a system. which, you know, a neurotypical person does not need to have a system to know how to deal with social interactions. I created these systems of like, okay, these are the topics that I can initiate a conversation on in order to appear socially natural, you know. I rarely initiate, I usually just respond and take it from there. I do share a lot of my interests and my emotions, but I have to be careful about who I do it with, and I don't do it appropriately, because like sometimes I'll be oversharing and it's like people will get confused, you know. So it is an impairment in a way. Also the normal back and forth conversation. If you have ADHD, I don't know if I have ADHD or autism, but there's also I interrupt people quite a lot when they talk. You might have seen the live that I did on Zoom with Van der Piet and older INFP Insights. And it's kind of like you have to each talk one at a time because you are on speaker, you know? And I could not do that, and my sound quality was bad. And it's difficult for me to respect okay, this person says this and then indicates when I can talk, and then I talk, and then I indicate when next person can talk. That does not come naturally to me. And it used to be that I never talked, basically, when I was a child. And then when I started talking, then I realized like I could not stop myself from interrupting people. So that is deficit in the reciprocity. Okay, so that's number one. And so you need to have that. And number two is deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures, to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. Now, I have a lot of facial expressions, so that kind of says against that. What I do have a problem with is eye contact. I have a hard time, you know, with especially people I don't know well. I don't know how. Usually I focus on the person's mouth when they talk so that I'm sure to understand what they're saying. Or I look at their foreheads, because that's something that I learned when I was in school. When you were doing a presentation, people would say, oh, you have social anxiety. Just look at people's foreheads and your presentation will go well. I often look at people's mouths, which gives people the wrong idea. I have a hard time looking at people in the eye for like longer periods of time, because I forget what I'm about to say when I do that. Another thing is that my body language is, I am very animated with my hands, which is not the cultural norm here in Sweden. But at the same time, I don't have the same body language as like a person from France. I have like my own cultural language with my gestures. A lot of people have remarked on that, and I don't know why I have these gestures, but it helps me talk in a way. However, it is difficult for me sometimes to interpret other people's nonverbal communication. So deficits in understanding and use of gestures. So there's the understanding, you know, because people can mean a lot of different things from their body language. So there's that. Then there's deficits in developing, so you need to have that. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts, to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends, to absence of interest in peers. Now, I was always interested in having friends, but I would only latch on to like one friend. And then I would be having a hard time making new friends. And in imaginative play, I would often like want things to be done my way, and it's like if somebody was taking over, I would feel like they were bossing me around, and I did not like that. But I could interact with imaginative play. It's just that often I would make much bigger stories in my head than what was actually being played out with other people. I often did not like to play mommy, daddy, big sister, little baby, because I just felt like I was being bossed around and not taking part of my own imagination, which was way more interesting to me. There is difficulty for me to understand relationships, which is kind of a reason why I might be asexual. Because I have a hard time like knowing like, okay, this person is a close friend and this one is a best friend, and like, does this person think the same as me? It's difficult, you know? I understand that there's much more under the surface that I am not seeing and that I'm oblivious to. And the way that I don't really understand romantic relationships, because I don't have that sort of attraction. And a lot of this is confusing to me. And people would always be like saying things behind my back for some reason. And then people would joke about me, or that say, oh, it's just a joke. And I'm like, what? And then I'd get bullied because I didn't understand what was going on. And probably a lot of it went over my head because I was always left out. So something is there. Okay, let's go to the next one. So you need to have all three of those social things. Now, criterion B is the behaviors. Restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities is manifested by at least two of the following. So you need to have 2 out of 4 of these behaviors. Number 1 is stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. For example, simple motor stereotypes, like flapping hands or like, always doing the same movement. Lining up toys or flipping objects. Echolalia, which is repeating words or sentences or stuff. Idiosyncratic phrases. Now, you can also be masking these things quite a lot. I do a lot of this with my fingers, quite a lot. I scrunch up my toes in my shoes, which people can't see, so that's great. I also bite my lip quite a lot. I pick at my neck quite a lot, which has led to me having actually like quite a lot of like scars. I have a scar here, which is because I kept like scratching it. So I do this skin picking, which is kind of not great. I don't think that I was a child who lined up objects, but I did have a very messy room, so it might have like stopped me from lining up things. But I did like these kinds of sensory kind of play with like Play-Doh. I would always do the same Play-Doh, the same snails. Simple motor stereotypes. I did not really do the flapping of hands, but I would like to skip. I liked skipping, and I would skip all the time rather than walk or rather than run. I just liked skipping when I was a child. I think that for this specific criteria, you need to look at how your child self was, because I think that with time, with age, you start learning to like not do these behaviors. So it's a little bit more difficult to find these if you are getting yourself diagnosed as an adult. Because if you were like going around flapping your hands and rocking back and forth as an adult, like somebody would have figured out that you have autism. The reason people haven't figured out is because you've masked all these behaviors. I do echolalia. There was a point when I was like in middle school where I had a friend. I still have that friend, but she would be like, stop repeating everything I say. And I was like, I just thought that she was so cool, so I wanted to say everything that she said. And I was like, oh, like I couldn't stop myself. Like she would say something. She'd be like, oh yeah, we went there. I was like, yeah, we went there. And it's like, you can't keep doing that, you know? And so she started like actually getting like walking away from me because I was like, I kept doing that and I couldn't stop myself. Also, I usually talk to myself, and I have these certain phrases that I say to myself quite a lot. And I have my scripts, you know, but I think that comes in the next one. But I'll be saying these sentences to myself that are like, actually, you know, why are you saying these sentences? You know, they're not like anything new. They're just whatever I heard during the day. I'd be, there's certain Swedish sentences that I keep saying, like, I'll be like, exakt, ja precis. And I'll be like, precis, ja, ja. And I'll be like saying these things, and it's not like that they're anything constructive, but I'll be saying them to myself, you know? It's kind of like I'm preparing myself to do these certain things. So, yeah, that's that. And also idiosyncratic phrases. Obviously, I do that, but I think the INFPs, we do this. Like, we'll use certain sentences. Also, I didn't grow up in Sweden, so a lot of my sentences don't really make sense to a Swedish person. So I guess I'll have to give that one up. Okay, so that's when I maybe have, maybe not, we don't know. But I do this with my fingers quite a lot, because sometimes I'm just like, what are my fingers doing here? That's another thing. Okay, insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or non-verbal behavior. E.g., extreme distress at small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns, greeting rituals, need to take the same route or eat the same food every day. Okay, now, sameness. I have a hard time with change. It is extremely stressful to me. It's because I'm sensitive, right? I am sensitive to changes. It gives me a lot of anxiety. I have a hard time with transitions. Once I've started to read a book, I can't stop reading a book. I have to like physically bring myself out of that state. And it's like getting myself to the shower, getting myself out of the shower. It's difficult to transition between different activities. Another thing is rigid thinking patterns. At least when I was younger, a lot of it was black and white. It's like, okay, this person is bad, this person is good. I mean, with time, I've managed to like open my perceptions and like realize, yeah, okay, well, this person was acting in this way because of this thing and all that. But when I was young, I was definitely pretty rigid in my thinking. Greeting rituals. I always say the same thing to my patients when they come in and when they come out. And I've talked about this quite a few times. But I'll be like, have a good day. And when they come in, I'm like, welcome. And then I'm like, welcome in. And then I say, sit down. And then I say, well, I'm saying all these things in Swedish, right? But I'll be like, sit down. Or it's like, or I'll say something like, I don't have a hook in this room. And they'll be like, oh. And it's like, I have this ritual. And if suddenly the patient decides to sit in another spot than the one that I've assigned them, I get all thrown off. I'm like, you know, everything feels weird and it's uncomfortable. So that is rigid greeting rituals. Needing to take the same route or eat the same food every day. I eat pretty much similar things. I'm not against eating different things, but I'd rather eat similar things every day. Because they're good things. They're things I like, you know. So changing it up, I need to know that the thing that I'm going to be eating is just as good as what I usually eat. Otherwise, I will not eat that. I also like taking the same route to work every morning, but sometimes I change a little bit the route so that I'll cross the street at a different place. But I won't be going like a completely different route, because it kind of helps my thinking to go on the same route, because I usually think about the same things when I arrive to certain areas. And it helps me process things. So yes, I relate to that. Okay, highly restricted. So this is number 3 out of the 4 on the list, and you need to have 2 out of the 4. Highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, e.g. strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or perseverative interests. So basically they're talking about special interests, which is autistic people call them special interests. For me, my special interest is making videos. So it's like I can't stop myself from making the videos. It's just I make the videos. At this point, like stopping myself from making a video would make me anxious, you know? Or watching videos about cults. At this point, I've watched so many hours of videos about cults. Like every day, I watch at least half an hour about cults. So yes, it's a special interest. It's an abnormal focus and intensity on a certain topic. And I can't stop myself from thinking about, like, it makes me feel better when it's kind of like an addiction. I'm like, it makes me feel better when I watch a video about cults from my favorite YouTubers. It also makes me feel better to make a video. Or to watch videos by other creators. So yes, that is my special interest. At the moment, it's also reading. I am reading quite excessively a lot. And like stopping myself from doing that is counterproductive. It makes me feel really good to read. Okay, then there's hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment, e.g. apparent indifference to pain temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. Now, this is why I need a lava lamp, which you can help me buy on Ko-fi. Okay, I'll have the Ko-fi link in the description. I am obsessed with Vondelpiet's lava lamp, so often I'll be watching the lava lamp instead of watching Vondelpiet, which is kind of against the point, but I guess that he wants to hypnotize me with his lava lamp. I have a fascination with lights and movement. I love lamps. Certain lights from certain lamps will make me feel better than others. And I'm really sensitive to different textures. Like I can't have any clothes, like I need to have comfortable clothes, and different cuts are different sensory issues around a lot of things. I am not indifferent to pain or temperature. I'm rather extremely sensitive to pain and temperature. And that sucks, but that's how it is. So when it's cold, like I'm grumpy about it, when it's hot, I'm grumpy about it. When I'm in pain or I'm ill, it is terrible and I'm grumpy about it. And sometimes it can be to the point where I get a panic attack. If it is so cold that I have a hard time breathing, I have gotten into panic attacks because of that. So yes, I am hyper reactive to quite a lot of sensory input. So 2 out of the 4. Now C is that the symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, so childhood, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities. So basically, when you're an adult, you have more expectations put on you, so the symptoms manifest. Or they can be masked by learned strategies in later life. So you might have symptoms as a child, but then being able to mask them as a teen and young adult. Yeah. Now, D is, and yes, I've had these things since childhood, but certain things I've been able to mask and certain things have gotten worse. For example, me procrastinating everything and not knowing what to do. And also having to be in extremely, in places where I need to deal with a lot of sensory input. Symptoms, so the D is the disability, you could say. The symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. So you can't just be in like one area, it has to be several things. So does it cause problems at work? For me, not much, but it has led to burnout. So yes, in that way, yes. Social, yes, it has led me having a hard time with friends and being isolated. And other important areas, well, hobby-wise, it has been hard for me to find a hobby because I get so obsessed by things that aren't like considered normal hobbies. There's also the fact that there are many skills that I haven't learned for basic daily functioning, that because I have social problems, I get a lot of social anxiety about them, and then I never learn how to do these things because I'm so scared of asking other people. So, there's a whole other thing going on. Does the autism symptoms affect my daily functioning? Yes. Also the fact that like I can't go to clubs. There are many places I can't go because they're too sensory stimulating for me. And there are a lot of things I cannot do because they're too sensory overwhelming. There are a lot of things that are emotionally too overwhelming. And also I seem very weird, which impacts my social life, basically. Now, E is these disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability, intellectual developmental disorder, or global developmental delay. Intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder frequently co-occur. To make comorbid diagnosis of autism spectrum and intellectual disability, social communication should be below the expected for general developmental level. Now, I don't have an intellectual disability. I've done pretty well in school, and I took an IQ test once, and I was a little bit above average. I wasn't like crazy smart or anything, but I was, in the normal range. And yeah, I don't have an intellectual disability. So basically, criteria E is positive, So basically, if I diagnose myself, I think that it actually does fit with autism. The only thing is that the criteria are so weirdly worded that like it gets confusing, and so you could think that I'm twisting all of my experiences to fit the model, but that's not what's happening, It's that I'm trying to really understand all of the words from the criteria and trying to relate it to my life. And yes, sometimes I relate to it more than I am comfortable with, But I don't have an official diagnosis. You know, I'm in the special interest of autism right now, so like I have like 200 videos that I agree on about autism. So I kind of know my stuff, I could say. I'm going to stop this video now because it's been way too long. But I want to say that I'm not against people who think that HSP is a real thing. But I think that these people should look into the HSP criteria, because there aren't really any criteria. Basically, all that is being said about HSP could be an autism diagnosis, you know? From what I've found out, like all the people that I know who thought that they were HSP fit the criteria of autism or have gotten an autism diagnosis. So there is something there, you know? And just because you don't want to get a diagnosis, that's fine. But don't tell people who are looking for a diagnosis to that they are just highly sensitive. You think that you're giving them a compliment, you know, by saying, "Oh, you're not sick like these other autistic people." That's a ableist, you know? You're saying that autistic people basically are not worth as much of a person as a person who calls themselves highly sensitive person. You're saying that an autistic person is ill and should be cured, rather than that they are different and that there's nothing wrong with being autistic. I think that the culture is more turning towards that autistic people have a different neurotype than neurotypical people, and they are different. It is a spectrum, but it is a disability because it leads to mental health problems, but because these people with autism cannot function in society as well. They must accommodate and they must adapt a lot to the world outside them in order to seem like they function. So trying to distance yourself from the label of autism by putting another label, HSP, is not something I would recommend, you know? I'd rather like people actually looked into autism a little bit more before they immediately dismissed it as that they're just sensitive. Okay. Because you really are sounding like you're just special. You know, you're a special snowflake. When really you might get some help to be able to grow in society rather than, well, victimize yourself. Okay? So that's all I had to say on the subject. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.